The historic storm hit most Texans hard, but was even more dangerous to those who were trapped, who relied on medical devices and mobility aids, or were cut off from essential care services. A more resilient power grid may be necessary, but that's not all. Houston is no stranger to disasters, and disaster preparations during good times are key to responding to the next one. Disaster prep is a two-way street that requires input from local governments and vulnerable individuals themselves, according to Stephanie Duke of Disability Rights Texas, an expert on emergency planning for the elderly and those with disabilities. What's in place right now to take extra care for people with disabilities? What kind of systems are out there to support people in something like this? I realize it's a historic storm, but in similar situations like disaster prep.
So there's supposed to be inclusive planning and preparedness at the local level, which with each emergency management department that every county, city is supposed to have, all 254, and some of them are interjurisdictional depending on the size of the city and where they are. So, but each county, city has an emergency plan. You have your basic plan, and then you have annexes that either address specific emergency support functions or a specific type of hazard, because what you need for a wildfire is going to be different than what you need from a freeze or flooding or a hurricane. So, and all of that process.
Is that mandated, ma'am? Like that each county have a...
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. Chapter 418 of the government code requires that each emergency department has the emergency plan. And FEMA has a whole national framework that lays out how it should be done, who's involved. And it's not just one thing. It's a whole multifaceted cross horizontal, vertical alignment of services and how, you maintain continuity for things. And normal disasters, right? You have a geographic area that's impacted. So a lot of times you have MOUs with other jurisdictions saying, hey, we're going to need such and such if something happens here. But when you have a statewide event, which we've seen with COVID as well, of course, on the public health side, scarce resources become much more of an issue because you can't go to somebody else to get help. So if you don't have that inclusive preparedness and planning in blue sky times to account for the needs in your community, when it comes time to respond and you haven't done that, you've left out a huge portion of your population.
And obviously the amount of support, it's uneven depending on where you're at. I'm sure there's a lot more support in certain areas than others.
Right. And the emergency management itself is the discipline of assessing risks and being able to plan for that risk. And you're never going to be able to do 100% certainty for planning for everything, right? But part of the process is accounting for all the what ifs and what you have. And of course it comes down to money and what you can afford and being prepared. But, the disability community is left out of that planning process, whether it's those integrated into the community or if you have long-term care facilities, they're required to have their own plans, but is that coordinated within the city or county to make sure that they've done that as well?
Right. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, can you spell out specifically what does a strong support system for people with disabilities look like in emergencies?
To me, it comes down being informed enough in advance to make your choices. If you're going to choose to shelter in place, do you have the means to sustain what you need, whether it's electrical, healthcare, food, water, whatever? Or if you choose to evacuate, do you have the means to do that and make those decisions, choices beforehand? When you become reliant on someone else, you lose that choice. So without the information, you don't get to make that choice.
Okay. And
obviously we've gotten much better, especially with hurricanes. The cone of certainty has gotten smaller. We're more, with technological and scientific advances, weather events we've gotten better about. And we learn, unfortunately, from every disaster. But we've got to start doing a better job of preparing for each disaster.
Okay, and obviously things are going to have to change. And with what you see happening right now and the process going forward, where would people with disabilities have input? What are their opportunities to insert themselves into this process that's going on?
At the local level, find out who your emergency department is, contact them, get involved, let them know what your needs are, whether, like I said, you're transportation dependent, your health care, even in an evacuation, you're not guaranteed you're going to get into continuity of care if you're displaced to another jurisdiction. So it's having those conversations in blue sky time. Who's responsible for what? Make this information transparent to the public. And then how can I ask my questions to the right people so that way I'm informed in how to prepare myself. To build resiliency, you have to have preparedness and inclusive planning for all populations. So effective communication, knowing who to ask those questions to, and being able to make those choices. And, as a public service attorney, we're advocating for those that have, disproportionately impacted. So making sure that is available to our most vulnerable as well. We need to do a better job of preparedness and getting that information out there.
How did the Texas winter storm affect you? Disability Rights Texas is asking people with disabilities to complete a survey so they know more about what happened to you. They'll use the info to advocate much needed change in Texas. Take the survey at drtx.org. Two more related items. The IRS has extended the April 15th and other tax deadlines for winter storm victims in Texas. Go to irs.gov/disasters. Finally, a correction. Last week I gave the wrong number of deaths in Texas from the storm, confusing it with deaths from all states. I apologize to you, the listeners, and assure you I'll work hard to bring you accurate information and perspectives every week. As of Monday, the Associated Press reported at least 40 deaths in Texas, with the number likely to grow. For the People's News, this is John Moeller reporting.